So today I'm going to be doing the infamous shifter rebuild. Here are the three components needed for the rebuild. The first one is the pivot point that the center of the shifter pivots inside. Then there's the pivot ball on the bottom that drops into the transmission. And then I got a new spring as well. So there's the part number for the spring, the pivot ball, and then the center pivot piece, whatever you want to call it. I have some leftover high temp urea grease from Honda from my SI transmission rebuild last year. Alright, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and remove the OEM shift knob. There's a 14mm hex head nut underneath the boot here, so you're going to want to break that loose, unthread the shift knob counterclockwise, then take that nut off. So next thing you're going to want to do once you got your shift knob and locking nut off is start to pry up the center console. I usually like to start back here and pop that tab up first and then slowly work around. I didn't use any tools to break anything loose. I'm not sticking a flathead screwdriver in anywhere to break these tabs loose. So just use your hands, be gentle with it, try not to crack the plastic. So that was much easier than I thought it was going to be. This is all loose already. When you pull up the center, you just want to unclip these two connectors that go to the hazard button and the roof control button. Just undo those and you can slide the center console off pretty easily. And then now underneath you have this rubber boot on the shift mechanism and you have this white ring underneath. So around the perimeter around the rubber boot here there was foam insulation. I ripped that out of the car because it felt like it was deteriorating, and it's 15 years old, so I'll probably pick up a new piece of that. Alright, so getting this plastic ring off was really a pain in the ass. The only way I was able to get it off was to use a flathead screwdriver and then get behind the tabs, bending it across, trying to get it as flat as I can. Where the arrows are, there's 4 arrows around the perimeter. They're each about 90 degrees apart from each other. There's one right there, down here, and then over there as well up there. I think I may have broke this thing, so I'm probably going to have to order a new one from Honda, as well as the insulation as I just mentioned. But I did get it loose, so I'm going to pull this up now and see what's underneath. So once those components are out of the car, I got the rubber boot off as well as the plastic ring. I'm going to take a look in here, and you have another rubber protective boot that has a little tab on the front that you can grab with needle nose pliers, and that thing should pull straight up. Okay, so this piece actually doesn't pull up further because the diameter of where it is won't clear this bigger diameter here. It's actually dropped down to where it shrinks down there, so that has to stay on without ripping it. Alright, so we managed to get the shift assembly out of the car. All you got to do is take off the 3 10mm hex head bolts that hold this assembly down. I'm just going to move the rubber boot to the side to access each one. You pull it straight up. There's a spring force, so it'll kind of snap upward, and then these are your components. The grease and plastic on here is 15 years old, so the grease is pretty much all dried out and gummy feeling, so I think this will be quite a noticeable difference. So what happens is over time, the end ball pivot here, it wears over time because it's metal on plastic contact, so there's a little play in that, and there's also a little play in this assembly up here, and the larger ball that everything pivots on up there. So when you replace these two components, the tolerances should be nice and fresh, and when you get fresh grease in there, it should take out a lot of your slop in your shifter. Alright, so I'm going to try to break these parts off. The old shifter pivot ball. Alright, so once you pop your plastic piece off of the pivot ball here, you're going to want to inspect the surface of this, because if I were to do it again, I should have used something plastic to pry against the other plastic piece to break it, and not a metal screwdriver, because it actually marked up the surface to this nicely machined piece. So if I were to put the new plastic piece over it, it pivots on it, and if there was kind of sharp edges of burrs from the metal, it would wear out the new plastic piece kind of quick. So what I did was I took some 1500 grit sandpaper and just smoothed out all the burrs on there so it feels nice and smooth now before I put the new plastic piece back on. So I've got all these surfaces nice and clean from all the old grease, so this surface is perfectly clean, and this surface up here is clean as well. So what I'm going to start doing now is I'm going to apply the urea grease to this surface and then the pivot up here and pop the new plastic pieces on. Alright, so I've got the new urea grease here. That's how much is left over from my transmission rebuild, so there's quite a bit left. All over this pivot ball here, and then apply it liberally down over here as well. Alright, so I've got this coated with quite a bit of grease now. Just get it uniform over all the surfaces. Alright, so I've only got one shot at this. This is the new plastic piece that clips onto the larger pivot point up there. And I just noticed it's not symmetrical on all sides. It's got this slot on the top, but that faces forward in your car. And I'm pretty sure when I took it out that this bracket here sat to the left. So when I put this in, I'm going to set this towards the driver's side with that edge pointing towards the driver's side, and then have your part with your slot sticking out pointing straight ahead like this. Alright, so let's try this. I'm going to put 2 sockets there, and I'm going to try to set the edges of each socket on the plastic part and then push straight down. Hopefully this will work. Well, it made a lot of noise, but I got it on. There we go. That's nice and tight on there. That is actually extremely tight on there. When I move this, it's very hard to move because that plastic is gripping the ball very hard, and all the slop has been taken out of the shifter by that. So it should feel much better when it's back in the car and mounted. Alright, so the last thing to replace is the other pivot point, the plastic piece on the bottom. I'm going to set this flat on the table over here. And we're going to use that end and just push straight down on it. Make sure that end is lubed up real good with grease, because when you pop it in there you want as much in as you can get. So I just globbed a bunch more on there to make sure. Now we're going to come down and push straight down on this. That's hard to go in as well. There it is. Now we have 2 new components. There's no play in this bottom piece anymore, and there's no play in this piece, so everything should be feeling brand new now. So now I'm going to coat the outside of all these components and just add excess grease everywhere, which is when this slides back in the car. The mounting points in the car where this slides along is going to be metal, so you're going to want to grease the inside of the car as well and add extra grease on the outsides of the plastics. Alright, so I got much better lighting now that it's actually daylight out. So when you get back into the car, you're going to want to apply grease all around the outer diameter here and in these slots, as well as get it on the inner diameter of that ring you see down there, because that's where that smaller pivot point moves. So replacing all the plastics should take out all the tolerance slop between the metal in there as well. Alright, so this is all greased up and ready to go now. As you can see, I applied grease to the all the metal surfaces those plastic pieces will contact when you drop this down in there. So it's all the way around, and we're ready to put the shifter back in now. Alright, so now I got my GoPro on so I can work with 2 hands, and this piece here is ready to go back into the car. You're going to want to make sure this piece that sticks out on the side there drops straight down to the driver's side, so when you put it in, it should go in straight like this. Actually, before you put it in, make sure you line your metal ring up with the profile of what's down there, and actually I don't really remember which way it went, so I'll have to figure that out. I know this tab pointed straight ahead, so you can line up the profile of this rubber boot with the metal piece here. So that actually looks like the way it's supposed to go, because you're supposed to line up the profile. Okay, that all makes sense now. Glad I remembered that. So make sure you line your rubber tab up here with that piece that sticks out, the alignment slot there, to go into the slot down there. So when you slide this in, bam, and now I instantly feel there's no wiggle at all to the shifter back and forth. It is just straight solid. Alright, so now is going to kind of be a tricky part. You're going to have to pull this rubber boot to the side while you try to get these screws started, and hopefully I don't drop any down in there. I'm starting with the back one here and holding the rubber boot out of the way with one hand. I'm going to put this bolt down in there with this long socket extension and hopefully get it started. Alright, I got lucky on that one. This one is started, so the rest of the 3 shouldn't be as difficult. Alright, so I was able to spin this to the side and then pull back on this so you can access the upper right hole. So I'm going to grab another bolt, put it in my socket here. Probably be helpful if these were magnetic, if you had a magnetic extension or something to hold these in, but don't have one at the moment, so I'm just going to do it by feel here. And I've got that one started as well, so I'm just going to continue to thread that down, hand tight to the bottom before you torque everything down. You got your last one here, and I'm going to spin this so you can access it just like that. Alright, so all three of them are started, and when you secure them all down, you're going to want to tighten them down to 7.2 foot-pounds of torque. The bolts aren't even tightened down yet, and I can instantly tell. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? This is really dumb of me. I forgot to put the spring in there. So I have no force pushing up on the spring. So now I've got my spring on there. Don't forget to do that, because I just put this whole thing back together without the spring in there. So you're going to need to have your new spring secured on this assembly. You just drop it straight over and it mounts on this plastic piece. And you're going to go ahead and insert it back into the car. And now it's going to fight you. It's going to spring upward while you're trying to put the bolts in, so it's going to be a little more difficult. Alright, so once you got everything torqued down, you can spin this around so the tab's up front. Push this rubber piece back over the metal piece to seal off the bolts and the plate from all the environment. And it is back together, and all I got to do now is put the rubber protective boot over it, snap the plastic ring in place, put a new installation piece in around the outside, and then put the center console back in, and you're ready to go. But I can already tell that this is a huge improvement just in the way this snaps back and forth, and then up and down, more difficult to push, so that spring is doing a better job. And going through the gears, I mean, there's little to no play in the whole assembly anymore. So I definitely recommend to do this. Alright, so we've got the rubber boot here. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the car. I'm going to align these four holes here with the 4 holes down there, because that's where these tabs drop in. Make sure you didn't break your tabs when you pulled this out of the car. If you got to get a new one of these, it's like $3 from Honda. So go ahead and buy a new one. I didn't break any, so I didn't need a new one. The only thing I ordered anything new of, in addition to the pieces for the shifter assembly, is the insulator ring that goes on the outside, which did not come in the mail yet. So I'll replace that later. All you got to do is it's just a foam piece you drop in and line the perimeter of this assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this rubber piece back in, pushing it down. It's all lined up. And then you're going to pop your plastic ring over, make sure your arrow's lined with the holes, and you should be good to go. There we go. The ring is pushed down, and I heard the tabs lock in, and this is all reassembled and good to go. Here's kind of an Easter egg I uncovered when rebuilding the shifter assembly. When I pulled apart the center console, I actually found these Charlottesville, Virginia airport parking cards here from February of 2007. So that's pretty cool, and it confirms the fact the previous owner of my car was from Virginia, because the Carfax said the previous owner had this car registered in Virginia. So I'm glad to have it here in New York now and never have it see any salt. The front end has been completely rebuilt and repowder coated, all new OEM hardware. So this thing should stay new forever now. Thanks for watching, guys. Drop a like, please, and subscribe, and drop a comment if you have any questions. Thanks.